In just 4 seconds of dead silence, Senator John Kennedy completely destroyed Adam Schiff's 7-year political career on live national television. The difference between your stories and mine, Senator, is that mine were meant to be funny, yours were meant to be believed. Senator, you've had 400 chances to speak. Let me have just one. That's a great fishing story, Senator. But the fish just aren't biting anymore? Adam Schiff spent 7 carefully planned years building an untouchable political career. But Senator John Kennedy only needed 4 seconds of dead silence to completely burn it down on national TV. The air inside the Senate Judiciary Committee chamber was so thick it was hard to breathe. What was supposed to be a boring C-SPAN broadcast about intelligence reform, the kind of dull government meeting that barely gets 10 viewers, suddenly blew up into a massive national event. 47 million people were glued to their screens, holding their breath. They weren't there for the routine schedule, they were drawn in by the undeniable pull of a brutal, live, political showdown. The spark for this massive audience was a terrible mistake. Adam Schiff made the arrogant, planned decision to start the meeting by openly disrespecting John Kennedy right to his face. Kennedy, however, didn't flinch. He made the killer choice to sit perfectly still and let Schiff dig his own grave. The grand mahogany room only made the tension worse, trapping both men in a high-pressure space. This wasn't a normal Washington hearing where a chairman talks down to a powerless witness. This was a cage match between two equals with nowhere to hide. Both politicians sat at the exact same height, holding microphones with the same amount of power. They were surrounded by crystal-clear TV cameras that acted like snipers, capturing every tense jaw, stiff posture, and arrogant smirk with cold, careless detail. Schiff started his attack with the cold precision of a man who had been practicing in front of a mirror all morning, leaning aggressively into his mic, sitting straight up to show dominance. He used the smooth talking style he learned at Stanford and Harvard. He brought the exact same drama he had used for 7 years during major impeachment hearings and Sunday morning talk shows. Senator Kennedy, Schiff started, his voice dripping with obvious coastal snobbery, with all due respect, and I really doubt you deserve much. Your behavior in this room is a disgrace. He smirked, mocking Kennedy's famous everyday guy image. Schiff brushed off the Louisiana senator as a fake country lawyer, making fun of his wire glasses, heavy Southern drawl, and endless stories about regular working-class people back home. Schiff claimed it was all an act that insulted the American people and mocked the seriousness of the U.S. Senate. Sitting tall in his big leather chair, acting like a boss, bragging to a peasant, Schiff listed his impressive resume. He told the quiet room that he was the lead impeachment manager against a dangerous president, that he ran the House Intelligence Committee during major national security crises, and that he had spent his whole career protecting the country from people trying to ruin it. Then he stared right at Kennedy with a snobby Harvard glare meant for someone completely worthless. "What have you done, Senator, besides crack jokes?" Schiff asked, letting the insult hang in the quiet room. The liberal crowd immediately cheered, loving Schiff's rehearsed show. Behind the big wooden doors, Schiff's media team was already going wild, rushing to cut the video clip with a winning caption. At the same time, TV experts were typing up posts, calling it the best Senate takedown in modern history. The perfect soundbite was about to get 12,000 shares in minutes. The Washington elite thought they had a total victory, but they completely missed the one thing in the room that actually mattered. John Kennedy hadn't said a single word. He just sat there, totally calm in the middle of the storm. Slowly and quietly, he started cleaning his glasses with the tip of his tie, completely unbothered. He rubbed the lenses with the bottom of his tie, a familiar move that 40 million Americans instantly recognized. This slow, purposeful cleaning was a masterclass in timing, buying him precious seconds, just like an expert jazz player holding a beat before a big solo. Kennedy wasn't pausing because he didn't know what to say. He was waiting because he knew the silence would make his comeback hit like a truck. He slowly put his glasses back on, adjusted them on his nose, and then mysteriously took them off again, making the whole room sweat with tension. "Well," Kennedy finally said, stretching the word out before taking another long pause. "Senator," he continued, using another tactical silence that lasted 3 painful seconds and then 4. It was the slow pace of a Louisiana gentleman who has all day and plans to use every single second of it. Kennedy started in his famous, charming drawl. "You know my buddy Boudreaux down in Louisiana? He manages a catfish operation near Breaux Bridge. Has for roughly 3 decades now." He let the image sink into the serious political room before going on. "Boudreaux frequently remarks, 'When a fellow shows you who he is, trust him the first time.'" Kennedy nodded slightly, his face showing a friendly, down-home wisdom that perfectly hid the total destruction he was about to unleash. He called it plain, honest, street smarts, the kind you only learn from a guy who works with catfish all day, which Kennedy joked isn't much different from working in the U.S. Senate. Then, the Louisiana senator locked his eyes right on Schiff. The friendly country charm vanished, replaced by the sharp, intense stare of a top Vanderbilt law graduate and Oxford scholar. "You just revealed to me who you are," Senator Kennedy said, his voice dropping into a tone of total authority. "You are an individual who spearheaded 2 impeachments, directed the intelligence panel, appeared on TV more than 400 times, claiming you had proof of Russian conspiracy, and was officially censured by your own peers 213 to 209 for lying to the American people." Kennedy smoothly moved to Schiff's insult about his achievements. "You asked what I have achieved?" "Valid question," Kennedy agreed easily. He admitted he liked to tell stories, mostly funny ones, about Boudreaux's catfish farm and about his mother, who taught him that a real gentleman never yells, because the raw truth doesn't need to be loud. Kennedy spoke passionately about the hard-working people in Louisiana who build things with their hands, mean what they say, and don't need an Ivy League degree to tell the difference between the truth and a made-up fishtail. He leaned forward a bit, closing the distance between them, and delivered his first lethal blow. "The distinction between your stories and mine, Senator, is that mine were intended to be amusing. Yours were intended to be trusted." Kennedy let the silence choke Schiff for a full second before adding, "And, Senator, mine were factual." He quickly shifted focus to Schiff's obsession with being on TV, saying he was going to break down Schiff's long media history. "Because you certainly possess a television history. Actually, I would argue you might have the biggest TV history of anyone in this room," Kennedy noted, with a straight face. "And I say that as a person who has been on Fox News enough to have my own parking space." The crowd burst into real laughter, the very first genuine moment of joy in the tense hearing. Kennedy smiled back, a warm, charming look that hid his deadly accuracy, just like a beautiful southern tree hides strong iron roots underground. Now, in complete control of the room, Kennedy started breaking down the hard math of Adam Schiff's lies, laying out the numbers with the cold logic of an experienced lawyer. Between March 2017 and June 2017, which is about 330 weeks, give or take, you made over 400 TV appearances, Kennedy stated, his voice flat and firm. He listed the networks like a criminal charge: CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, NBC. He named the hosts Schiff. Used as megaphones Jake Tapper, Wolf Blitzer, Rachel Maddow, Chuck Todd. Kennedy pointed out that Schiff was on all of them, showing up constantly, eagerly, and without stopping. Kennedy paused to wipe his glasses again, A physical mic drop forcing everyone to think about that crazy amount of screen time. 400 features in 330 weeks. That equals more than one per week. Kennedy did the math out loud. He explained that doing a TV interview every single week doesn't mean you just got a random call from a producer and decided to chat. A weekly appearance is a permanent booking. That is a routine. That is an individual who has a spot on their calendar between the dentist and a charity dinner that reads, "Deceive America" on CNN. Kennedy announced, watching Schiff clench his jaw defensively. Kennedy pointed out that during every single one of those 400 interviews, without fail, Schiff repeated the exact same serious accusation: "I have viewed proof of conspiracy between the Trump team and Russia." Kennedy tracked how Schiff's words constantly changed, explaining the intelligence trick of narrative migration, where a claim keeps shifting so it can't be pinned down, even though the toxic core stays the same. "I possess classified evidence" eventually turned into "the proof is in plain view," which later broke down into "collusion is not a legal phrase." Kennedy used a brutal fishing comparison, noting that Schiff's catch kept getting bigger. But the second anyone actually tried to measure it, the size magically changed. But then Kennedy dropped the jokes, his voice getting hard as he explained why Schiff's actions were much worse than a harmless fishing story. Throughout those 7 years, you had access to classified information that the American citizens did not. Kennedy warned the quiet room. He painted a vivid picture of Schiff sitting in a secure room, reading highly secret reports and joining classified briefings. Kennedy hammered home the harsh reality that those same reports, as later proven by declassified documents and the Inspector General's review, told a completely different story than the one Schiff was pushing on TV. "You knew," Kennedy declared, staring right at Schiff. He reminded Schiff that he had sat in secret meetings where witnesses, top Obama officials, intelligence directors, and key FBI agents all swore under oath that they had zero direct proof of an illegal plot. You had those documents, you kept them classified for years, and you walked out of those meetings, drove to the TV studio, and told the American citizens the exact opposite of what you had just read. Kennedy finished strongly. Kennedy made it obvious that a fishing story is just harmless fun, but what Schiff did was purposely abuse the gap between secret intelligence and what the public could know. It was a sacred trust meant to protect the country, not to fake a politician's TV career or drag out a fake story for 7 painful years. Kennedy then went through the damaging results of the national investigations. The Mueller probe took 2 years, 19 lawyers, 40 FBI agents, 500 search warrants, 2,800 subpoenas, and $32 million, running the biggest legal investigation of a president in U.S. history. The final result: absolutely zero proof of an illegal plot between the Trump team and Russia. The Durham probe went on for 3 more years, finally deciding that the first investigation should never have started at all, exposing the whole thing as a lie. Kennedy reminded Schiff that his own co-workers in the House of Representatives, the very people he had worked with for over 20 years, finally censured him in a massive 213 to 209 vote just for lying to the American people. Going back to his Boudreaux story, Kennedy joked that even though the catfish farmer was bad at math, once claiming he caught 47 fish in a bucket that only held 12, even Boudreaux could do Schiff's math. 400 interviews claiming proof, 3 different investigations finding 0, 1 official reprimand for deceiving. Kennedy counted out. 400 minus 0 is still 0. Senator, no matter how many times you said it on TV, Kennedy made it brutally clear this wasn't just a slip of the tongue or an honest mistake. It was a calculated, professional choice to go on national TV week after week for 7 straight years. telling the country he had evidence that 3 separate federal investigations proved didn't exist. Whenever Boudreaux tells a fishing tale, Kennedy explained, everyone at the bait shop knows it's a joke. The imaginary catfish grows from a few pounds to the size of a golden retriever. And nobody is fooled because it's just weekend fun. You told a fishing tale for 7 years and sold it as a federal case. That is not leisure, Senator. That is something different, Kennedy said softly. But you were consistent. I'll give you that. Consistently wrong, but consistent. Desperate to take back control of the story, Schiff leaned aggressively into his mic and interrupted. Senator Kennedy, the Mueller report clearly stated that it did not clear Kennedy didn't even blink, his timing perfect, as he cut Schiff off with terrifying speed. Senator, you have received 400 opportunities to speak. Allow me to have one. The room exploded, the sound of real, thrilled laughter filling the air. It was the genuine, relieved laughter of a crowd, finally watching someone say the exact words they had wanted to hear for 7 long years. Kennedy's interruption was a deadly finishing move, instantly crushing 7 years of Schiff's TV dominance into one undeniable math fact, and delivering it with perfect comedic timing. Never giving Schiff a second to recover, Kennedy ruthlessly jumped to September 2019, reminding everyone of the afternoon Schiff led a highly watched House Intelligence Committee hearing. Kennedy noted that Schiff started that major meeting by supposedly reading the real transcript of President Trump's controversial phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Kennedy gave a small nod to the tech crew, and the big screens in the room lit up, playing the damning video of Schiff from 3 years ago. The clip showed Schiff sitting in the chairman's seat, reading words into the official government record with the practiced, heavy seriousness of a top lawyer, presenting solid proof to a stunned crowd. The video caught Schiff saying, "I need a favor from you, though, and I'm going to say this just 7 times, so you better listen carefully. I need you to make up dirt on my political rival, understand a lot of it." Kennedy watched the clip play, nodding slowly like a tired man looking at bad evidence that didn't age well. Those words, "Senator," Kennedy said softly as the video ended, "the words you just watched yourself say on that screen. Those words don't exist in the transcript. Not a single one of them." He pointed out that the actual official record put out by the White House that same day said something completely different. "You made up those words. You wrote a script and read it from the chairman's seat of the Intelligence Committee on live TV," Kennedy accused, his voice sharp as a knife. Kennedy then attacked Schiff's famous excuse, calling it honestly one of the craziest things he had heard in his 20 years in politics. Schiff's defense that the fake reading was just satire. Kennedy slowly took off his glasses, held them in one hand, and looked at Schiff with a complex expression that perfectly mixed slight amusement with deep fatherly disappointment, looking exactly like a dad who caught his kid in a lie so obvious that getting mad felt useless. "Senator, I've been doing comedy in this room for 20 years. I know what satire is," Kennedy schooled him. "Satire is when the audience knows it's a story. Satire is when Boudreaux says he caught a catfish the size of a car, and everybody laughs because everybody knows Boudreaux doesn't even own a boat." Kennedy broke down exactly why Schiff's actions were so dangerous, pointing out that millions of Americans watched that hearing and truly believed the president said those exact words because they were delivered with the unquestionable authority of the Intelligence Committee chairman, a job built entirely on telling the absolute truth. Kennedy noted that when the real transcript finally proved that Schiff's dramatic reading was 100% fake, Schiff lazily brushed it off as a joke. "Senator, that's not satire. That is what we call in Louisiana getting caught." Kennedy dragged the words out, noting that the "I was just kidding" excuse didn't even work when his kids tried it at 6 years old. He explained that the whole Intelligence Committee only works because the public naturally trusts that the chairman's words are backed by secret facts. They can't verify themselves through public records or lawsuits. You abused that trust. You made up quotes, read them from the seat of ultimate government power, and when the real record proved your words were fake, you didn't apologize. You didn't fix the record. You called it satire and went on to your next TV interview, Kennedy concluded, declaring that Schiff had purposely broken the core trust of his job to pass off a story as sworn evidence. Senator, I am the funny guy in this building. You are supposed to be the serious one. That setup worked fine for 2 decades, until you started making up stories and calling it evidence. Schiff's jaw locked visibly, his face frozen in the tight, controlled look of a powerful man who knows he is being publicly roasted in the U.S. Senate and can't do a thing to stop it. It wasn't angry laughter. It was genuine amusement, the hardest thing for a politician to fight against. Kennedy's tone shifted a bit, dropping some of the jokes as his brilliant legal mind took over. He brought the room's attention to a more recent date, the 20th of January 2025. Kennedy told the story of how, in the final fading hours of President Biden's term, amid the usual pardons and commuted sentences, Biden gave a highly unusual preemptive pardon to Adam Schiff and the rest of the January 6th committee. Kennedy highlighted how weird this move was. It wasn't a pardon for a guilty verdict, an indictment, or even a formal charge, but a blanket pardon for things that hadn't even happened yet. It was a literal get-out-of-jail-free card, handed out as the president walked out the door to block any future criminal charges. Bringing up his catfish farmer friend again, Kennedy pointed out that even a regular guy like Boudreaux knows that normal people only get pardoned after they are found guilty, or at least charged, and usually only if the president is feeling super generous. But a preemptive pardon, Kennedy thought out loud, making it sound dark. A pardon given before charges are filed, before an investigation is done, before anyone has been officially accused of anything. That's different. That's not mercy, Senator. That's a shield. He explained that down in Louisiana, if a guy asks his lawyer for a pardon before he's even charged with a crime, the lawyer's first question is, "Well, what exactly did you do?" Kennedy glared hard at Schiff, highlighting the obvious fact that innocent people simply don't ask for pardons for crimes nobody has even accused them of committing. Senator, what did you do that required a preemptive pardon from the President of the United States on his last day in office? Kennedy asked, letting the question hang heavy in the air. He clarified he wasn't directly accusing Schiff of a crime, just asking the same logical question Boudreaux would ask. Kennedy mentioned had been a working lawyer for 40 years, and in his vast experience, the only people who desperately want early legal protection are people who know exactly what dark secrets are hiding in their closets. He pointed out that Boudreaux, who just catches fish and pays his taxes, sleeps fine without ever needing a presidential pardon. Schiff's desperate need for an early pardon before any charges were filed was, according to Kennedy, either the most overly careful legal move in American history or the absolute most revealing one. Tapping into basic law, Kennedy brought up Article 2, Section 2, warning Schiff that the Founding Fathers meant for pardons to come after crimes, not before them, as a safety net for political elites. Using his Louisiana logic one more time, Kennedy nailed the coffin shut. A man who locks the door before anyone knocks is a man who knows who's coming. And, Senator, you locked the door. Schiff reacted by placing his hands flat on his desk, palms down, fingers spread wide. It was a classic body language move meant to show complete openness, a physical way of saying, "I have nothing to hide." But John Kennedy had spent 20 years heavily studying body language in intense political fights, and his massive experience told him that people who press their hands flat on the desk are almost always hiding something right underneath it. Continuing his relentless timeline, Kennedy moved to August 2025, explaining how FBI Director Kash Patel made the explosive decision to release testimony from a Democratic informant. This person wasn't a Republican spy, but a longtime career staffer who had worked on the House Intelligence Committee for over 10 years. The informant swore under oath to the FBI in 2017 that Adam Schiff had personally ordered the illegal leak of classified intel specifically designed to hurt President Trump politically. Kennedy highlighted Schiff's incredibly shady reaction to this massive leak. Schiff didn't hold a fiery press conference, didn't put out a detailed denial, and didn't demand an open hearing to clear his good name. Instead, his immediate reaction was to set up the Senator Schiff Legal Defense Fund, registering it with the IRS, and opening it up for public donations to fight the informant's sworn statements. Kennedy, leaning on his 40 years of legal expertise, noted that hiring a lawyer doesn't automatically mean you're guilty. But the huge red flag is when the lawyer suddenly needs his own lawyer. When the man who spent his whole career investigating others sets up a fund to protect himself from being investigated, Kennedy mused. He offered another piece of swamp wisdom. When a man starts building a wall around his property in the middle of the night, it's not because he's decorating. It's because something is coming that he can't outrun and can't talk his way out of. Staring right into Schiff's eyes, Kennedy asked, "Senator, what is coming that you cannot outrun?" Kennedy then perfectly tied the whole destructive timeline together, explaining that lawyers build cases completely on patterns, and Schiff's was the most obvious he had seen in 40 years. He laid it out brutally. The foundation was 400 TV interviews between 2017 and 2023. Pushing fake evidence, the method was the September 2019 fake transcript played off as a joke. The money plan was the June 2023 Congressional censure, quickly followed by a shameless fundraising email. The backup plan was the January 2025 early presidential pardon, and the current reality was the August 2025 informant claim forcing him to start a legal defense fund. 400 interviews, 1 fake transcript, 1 censure, 1 pardon, 1 informant, 1 legal defense fund. Kennedy listed without stopping. That is not a career, Senator. That is a trail. And trails lead somewhere. Looking terrified, Schiff leaned hard toward his aide, engaging in the panicked, quiet, "What do I say?" huddle. That is the ultimate sign of a politician drowning in his own messy financial and legal records. The frantic whispering lasted exactly 4 seconds. Kennedy just waited, showing the endless patience of a Louisiana man who had all the time in the world. Kennedy then zeroed in on the June 2023 censure, highlighting how incredibly serious a formal reprimand from the U.S. House of Representatives is. He warned the room that a censure isn't just a quick internet tweet or a TV talking point. It is a permanent historical stain, an official record by a politician's own peers that they have terribly violated the rules of the institution. Kennedy showed pure disgust at the way Schiff handled this massive embarrassment. Instead of showing regret, apologizing, or quietly stepping aside, Schiff arrogantly called the censure a badge of honor and immediately launched a huge fundraising campaign. Kennedy noted with dark humor that Schiff made more money in the week after his public shaming than in any previous week of his entire political career. "You cashed in on it," Kennedy said, looking completely sickened. He explained that while regular folks like Boudreaux feel guilty when they get caught breaking the rules and quietly pay their $40 parking tickets, Schiff's quick, unstoppable reaction was to turn his own public disgrace into a cash cow. This action, Kennedy argued, showed everything about Schiff's twisted relationship with the truth. The truth for you is not something you share. It is something you sold, advertised, and business has been very good. Schiff shifted uncomfortably in his big leather chair, his body language screaming that he wanted to run out of the room, held back only by the fact that leaving would make an even worse viral video. Paralyzed by trying to figure out if staying was worse than running, the man who had aggressively dominated live TV for 7 years couldn't even make a simple choice. Kennedy slowly stood up, using his trademark nervous tic, taking his glasses off, putting them on, taking them off again, signaling to the 40 million viewers that he was about to deliver the final knockout punch. He summarized Schiff's whole record in one heavy breath: Stanford, Harvard, lead impeachment manager, intelligence chairman, 400 TV interviews claiming conspiracy, 1 fake document, 1 censure, 1 early pardon, 1 informant leak claim, 1 legal defense fund, and exactly 0 proof. Kennedy let the word zero hang in the air, letting the massive, crushing silence multiply its devastating meaning. "You and I are both storytellers, Senator," Kennedy said, making the ultimate comparison. He admitted his stories about Boudreaux's catfish and his mom's sweet tea were meant to be funny. And even if they were tweaked a little for laughs, the heart of them was always true. Schiff's stories about Russian collusion and fake phone calls, on the other hand, were never meant to be funny. They were tools of massive deception, built to be swallowed whole by millions of trusting Americans. The difference between a comedian and a con artist, Senator, is that the comedian tells you it's a joke, Kennedy announced, his voice echoing with total finality. "You told America it was evidence for 7 years. That's not a joke. That's a concept we don't have a polite word for in Louisiana. So I'll use the legal word fraud." Kennedy politely gave Schiff a chance to respond. Running purely on muscle memory, Schiff opened his mouth, his vocal cords automatically firing up the exact same factory-made talking points he had pumped out on demand for 7 years. "Senator Kennedy, the threat to the American Republic is real, and the evidence of Russian interference," Schiff started. Sounding like a broken machine, Kennedy's voice instantly dropped, completely stripping away the friendly country charm to reveal the ruthless Oxford-educated lawyer underneath. "There is no proof," Kennedy snapped, his face completely serious. He quickly fired off the facts. "Mueller said so. Durham said so. The Inspector General said so. And 213 of your own co-workers said so when they censured you." Kennedy pointed out that Schiff was pretty much the only person left in America still clinging to the lie. And now he needed an early pardon and a defense fund just to keep telling it. "You are telling the story again, Senator. Right now, in this room, to my face. The exact same story 7 years later, and it's still false." The automatic machine of Adam Schiff's political speech violently crashed to a halt. The assembly line of carefully planned sentences and rehearsed excuses broke apart, totally shut down because Kennedy had permanently ripped off the mask, exposing the speech as cheap fiction in front of 47 million people. The spell was broken. The hearing room plunged into 8 agonizing seconds of dead, heavy silence. Kennedy calmly slid his glasses back onto his face. "Do you know what Boudreaux would say right about now?" Kennedy asked softly, holding the longest, most dramatic pause of the whole hearing. It was the master control of a man holding back his best punch, calculating the exact millisecond to throw it. He would say, "That's a hell of a fishing story, Senator. But the fish just aren't biting anymore." And with that, John Kennedy turned around and walked out. The crowd behind him erupted in loud, rolling laughter, not mean-spirited mocking, but the deep, relieved realization of an audience watching a chronic liar finally get publicly dismantled by a simple Louisiana catfish joke. The final camera shot stayed on Adam Schiff, sitting completely alone on the stage, surrounded by echoing laughter, frozen in total silence. The man who had filled countless Sunday talk shows with the practiced rhythm of absolute certainty had been permanently shut down by a better, more truthful story. The internet immediately blew up. 3 different clips from the hearing went instantly viral, completely flipping the political landscape. The first clip, Kennedy's brutal "My stories were meant to be funny, yours were meant to be trusted," was shared an insane 300 million times in just 48 hours, permanently moving Schiff's entire political career out of the national security box and straight into the fake fishtail category. The next viral hit was Kennedy's sharp interruption, 400 opportunities to speak, allow me to have one, which quickly turned into a massive meme used to roast any politician hogging the microphone. The last and most lethal clip was the final exit line. "The fish aren't biting anymore," a phrase that instantly cemented itself in American political slang. The real-world fallout hit like a tidal wave. The Justice Department's intense investigation into the classified leak claims immediately ramped up, forcing members of the Senate Ethics Committee from both parties to issue official statements demanding a full review of the unsealed informant testimony. Ironically, the brutal public exposure caused a massive spike in donations to Schiff's legal defense fund, a fact Kennedy responded to with pure Louisiana common sense, simply noting, "Well, he's gonna need it." Down in Breaux Bridge, Louisiana, a small town of barely 8,000 people, a 6'2" man named Hank Thibodeau sat peacefully on the wooden dock of his 1-2-acre catfish pond, watching the broadcast on a cracked cell phone propped up against a plastic tackle box. Hank had been working these waters for 31 hard years, keeping up the pond his dad Remy had dug out with a rented bulldozer back in 1972 as a humble retirement plan, based on the belief that a man who can grow his own food will never truly go hungry. Hank wasn't exactly the fictional Boudreaux. Kennedy had mashed Boudreaux together from a bunch of different guys he had fished with over decades of crawfish boils and swamp weekends, but Hank was definitely the spiritual inspiration. Years ago, Kennedy had eaten Hank's cornmeal-fried catfish, dashed with hot sauce right on this very dock, soaking in the late afternoon shade, where the humidity slowed the world down to the exact steady pace that real life moves. Hank's cousin Gerald, a high school government teacher up in Bossier City, had frantically called that morning, begging Hank to turn on C-SPAN to watch Kennedy take apart the California politician who lied about Russia. With his living room TV broken since 2023, Hank watched the brutal political takedown from the dock. When Kennedy first brought up Boudreaux, Hank's wife Marie hollered from the kitchen window of their 1,975 three-bedroom house, yelling that Kennedy was talking about him again. Hank didn't even look up from the muddy water, calmly telling Marie that Kennedy was talking about the idea of him a version that caught bigger fish and told way better stories. But when Kennedy dropped the crazy stat of 400 TV appearances in 330 weeks, Hank nodded deeply at his phone in total, profound understanding. Hank understood the hard reality of a schedule. His schedule meant feeding the catfish at 5 a.m. in the pitch dark, checking the important oxygen pumps at 6 a.m. to stop mass die-offs, pulling nets at 7 a.m., and packing the work truck by 8 a.m. every single Tuesday and Thursday since 1995. A strict schedule meant intense, focused dedication. It meant getting up and choosing to do the exact same repetitive job because nobody else was going to do it. Hank pointed out to Marie over a cup of harsh, spoon-melting black chicory coffee that while his own exhausting routine successfully produced fresh catfish, Schiff's exact same level of relentless dedication was totally focused on manufacturing TV lies. When Kennedy finally delivered the kill shot, "The fish aren't biting anymore," Hank laughed so hard he almost knocked his phone right into the muddy pond. He wasn't just laughing at the joke. He was laughing at the deep, undeniable truth of it, a truth only a lifelong fisherman could feel in his bones. Hank explained to Marie that the absolute worst nightmare for a fisherman isn't an empty pond. It's a pond that used to be full of fish until a greedy fisherman ruined it by throwing the exact same fake lure into the exact same water 400 times until the fish totally stopped believing the illusion. Schiff had completely drained his own credibility, and Hank knew better than anyone that credibility, much like a spooked catfish, just doesn't come back once it's gone. Thousands of miles away, inside Kim's Cleaners, in a fading strip mall on Brand Boulevard in Glendale, California, a 5-year-old Korean-American woman named Patricia Kim stood behind the counter, pressing hot steam into a stiff button-down shirt while streaming the explosive Senate hearing through white earbuds. Patricia's parents, Jin Soo and Yoon Hee, had fled Seoul in 1986 with just 2 suitcases, eventually building this very dry cleaning business with their bare, chemical-burned hands in 1991. The tiny shop always smelled of heavy steam, harsh cleaning chemicals, and the unique, stubborn hustle of the American immigrant. Patricia took over the backbreaking work in 2015 when her dad's arthritis ruined his hands, and she had run it totally alone since her mom died of pancreatic cancer in 2019. Living her entire adult life in Adam Schiff's 30th Congressional District, Patricia had loyally voted for him 5 times in a row. She proudly kept his bright campaign sign right in the front window of her shop, right next to the tough plastic open sign her mom had bought at a discount store 30 years ago. Patricia had spent countless lonely nights eating dinner in the tiny apartment above the shop, watching Schiff on CNN. Soaking in his confident words, she blindly trusted his claims of Russian collusion because he was the powerful Intelligence Committee chairman, and as the child of immigrants, she was raised to deeply respect American government institutions and the people running them. But as Patricia listened to John Kennedy break down the 400 fake TV interviews step by step, she slowly stopped ironing the size 16 shirt. She already knew in her head since the 2019 Mueller report that the evidence Schiff pushed so hard had never appeared. But hearing a U.S. senator loudly declare it as an undeniable fact, wrapping it in a folksy catfish story that made the whole room roar with laughter, violently dragged the truth out of the shadows. A sudden, unstoppable wave of sadness hit her. It wasn't explosive anger, it was the specific, crushing grief of an immigrant's daughter who had put all her faith in the system, only to realize the man representing it was selling cheap lies for 7 years. She had personally defended Schiff to her older Armenian customers, promising he was an honest man, only to find out she had been fiercely defending a fraud. Standing alone in the empty, chemical-smelling shop on a quiet Wednesday afternoon, Patricia whispered to no one, "I trusted him." She mindlessly pulled out her earbuds, hung the stiff white shirt on the spinning rack, and went back to work while quiet tears rolled down her face, fully knowing that the strict rent on Brand Boulevard didn't care whose heart was broken by a lying politician. That night, eating a bowl of her late mother's favorite stew, Patricia told her cousin over the phone that the whole 7-year circus was just one giant, cruel fishing story, and she was the gullible fool who actually believed the fish was real. If you made it this deep into the details of this epic showdown, you just witnessed a historic political beatdown, where the funniest lawmaker in America completely destroyed the most censured lawmaker in America, proving without a doubt that the guy telling jokes was telling the truth, while the guy claiming to have secret evidence had absolutely nothing but hot air. Smash the like button if you've been waiting 7 agonizing years for someone to finally call out Adam Schiff's bluff with a razor-sharp smile on their face. Subscribe now for more legendary moments where the brilliant country lawyer from Louisiana consistently proves he's the smartest, most strategic guy in the room. Share this breakdown with every single American who sat through those 400 frustrating TV interviews asking, "Where is the proof?" Drop a comment below and let us know which of Kennedy's brutal knockout punches hit the hardest. Was it my stories were meant to be funny? 400 opportunities to speak? Innocent people don't ask for pardons? The lawyer needs a lawyer? Or the legendary kill shot? The fish aren't biting anymore? Let us know. And make sure you hit the notification bell right away, because the fallout from this hearing is far from over. With the Justice Department investigation heating up fast, the informant testimony completely unsealed, the legal defense fund begging for cash, and a Louisiana catfish farmer laughing all the way to the bank, the walls are closing in quick. God bless Hank Thibodeau and every hard-working American who tells honest fishing stories and actually means every single word. God bless Patricia Kim and every betrayed citizen who trusted a man who spent 7 years lying to their faces. And God bless Boudreaux, wherever he is, for teaching an entire country that the absolute best stories are always the ones that are true. 400 TV interviews, 0 proof, 1 massive censure, 1 desperate early pardon, 1 panicked legal defense fund, and 1 humble catfish farmer who saw right through the muddy water. The fish aren't biting anymore, Senator. And as the Justice Department starts circling, the only question left is how long until that preemptive pardon gets tested in federal court.